Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtike. So continuing with the discussion on Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita by Sri Das Goswami, Volume 3, Only He Could Lead Them, San Francisco, India, 1967, Chapter 23, The Price of Fear. So Prabhupada had written a letter from San Francisco to his disciples in New York and giving them further instructions. The letter had helped, especially the second paragraph. Brahmananda had posted it in the storefront. Now, Swamiji had clearly enunciated that they were still with him and he was still in New York with them. It was something special, service to the spiritual master in separation. And even the devotees in San Francisco who were with Swamiji every day could not yet know that its special taste. While the devotees in New York performed their daily duties, they often quoted from the letter and thought about it. Krishna will give you strength. Physical presence is immaterial. Presence of the transcendental sound received from the spiritual master should be the guidance of life. That will make our spiritual life successful. So later on, other places Prabhupada written this is as Vani and Vapu. Vapu means the body, physical presence. Vani means the transcendental sound. So he always stressed on the transcendental sound that is more important than physical presence or being in the physical association of spiritual master. Although Prabhupada had written that they could place his photograph on his seat, no one had a photograph. They had to ask the devotees in San Francisco for one. A boy took some poor colored snapshots and sent them to New York, and the devotees placed one at Prabhupada's sitting place in his apartment. It helped. For Prabhupada also, the letter to his disciples in New York marked a milestone. This was the basis on which he hoped to conduct a world movement. He could travel from place to place and yet be simultaneously present in many places by his instructions. Brahmananda, as president of the New York temple, frequently phoned San Francisco. The chanting is a focal point, he told Hagri. We can always sit and chant. We are beginning to understand what Swamiji meant when he said that worship in separation is more relishable. And Srila Prabhupada wrote to his New York disciples regularly, at least once a week. Brahmananda got most of the business instructions, arranged to purchase a new building in New York, see Mr. Coleman and get copies of the Kirtan record, get a copy of the movie a filmmaker had made of the devotees, investigate the possibility of publishing Bhagavad Gita. If I am assisted by one expert typewriter, Prabhupada told Brahmananda, we can publish every 3 months a book. And the more we have books, the more we become respected. Sri got a letter from Prabhupada asking him to type the dictated tapes of the new book, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Although Prabhupada's typist, Neil, had gone to San Francisco, after a day, he had disappeared. He could not carry on. I think you have 5 tapes with you because I have got only 3 with me, Prabhupada wrote. See that the tapes do not miss. Satsvarup had written inquiring how he would be able to understand transcendental knowledge. You are a sincere devotee of the Lord, Prabhupada replied, and certainly he will bless you with auspicious advancement in the matter of spiritual understanding. Rai Ram got a letter encouraging him to continue publishing the magazine. Back to Godhead will always remain the backbone of the society. Your ambition should always be how to improve the quality. Achyutananda, one of the youngest devotees, only 18, was now working alone in the kitchen. In a letter, Srila Prabhupada wrote to 5 devotees, signing his name 5 times. He told Achyutananda, since Kirtananda is absent, certainly you're feeling some strain. But the more you serve Krishna, the more you become stronger. I hope you are being properly assisted by your other God brothers. So only 18-year-old devotee, American, and he is cooking himself in the kitchen, by himself in the kitchen. It's amazing how Prabhupada motivated, encouraged everybody. Prabhupada advised Garg Muni. And yeah, one more sentence that he read. The more you serve Krishna, the more you become stronger. Very important. Of course, we hear of it, but we have to really get into it. People, devotees generally get worried or discouraged by the politics. Politics is everywhere, where it is not. But in the process, if we are engaged more and more in the service of Krishna, politics generally what happens is people don't want to do service. They just want to sit and show themselves as big leaders. But when it comes to physical service, they don't want to do it. But I'm not saying leaders don't serve. They can serve in their way. And if they are genuinely serving, great. But if in the process we get more physical service and even menial service, Krishna sees everything. Krishna sees who is playing politics and who is really, genuinely, devotedly serving. And even if it is a menial service, and even if it is, even if we think it's not helping the movement a whole lot, doesn't matter. Krishna is the one who's witnessing everything, and he is a judge. Nobody else is. So we carry on with whatever service we got. And if we do that service wholeheartedly and happily, yes, I'm being engaged, I'm being given this service, and I'll do it nicely. That's it. This is what Krishna wants to see. Prabhupada advised Garg Muni, also 18, to cooperate with his older god brothers, asking whether Garg Muni had gone to see his mother. Prabhupada said he hoped she was all right. Since Garg Muni was a temple treasurer, Prabhupada advised him checks should be drawn with full deliberation. And here, see, Prabhupada asked, hope his mother is all right. Again, among brahmacharis in Delhi, what I noticed, somehow there was an undercurrent for the newcomers that seeing your mother, father, parents, family members, this is all Maya. You are servant of Krishna. Eternal relationship is with Krishna, not with your parents, and don't be in Maya. That's wrong. Here, Prabhupada himself is asking, how's your mother? He did not stop Garg Muni from going to see his mother, and he's asking for his mother's condition. So it's not like all our relatives are Maya. Well, if we think that way, then are we away? Are we above Maya right now? Have we transcended Maya? No way. And this gives us a chance to set a good example. If we take care of our parents also, as devotees, to set an example for everybody else to see. Yes, devotees don't mean we have just renounced everything. And this helps in preaching also. So again, very wonderful instructions and wonderful example that Prabhupada is setting here. Prabhupada wrote Jadurani. I always remember you as the nicest girl because you're so devotedly engaged in the service of Krishna. She had informed him that she had been cheated by a boyfriend, and Srila Prabhupada replied, better you accept Krishna as your husband, and he will never be unfaithful. Devote yourself there for 24 hours in the service of Krishna and see how you feel happy in all respects. And this instruction by Prabhupada, she just followed it. She never got married. I don't think she got. I don't think she got married. And unfortunately, she's not in ISKCON anymore. But she is a wonderful devotee living in Govardhan under Narayan Maharaj, and she'll still doing wonderful paintings of pastimes of Radha Krishna. Rupanuga had written Prabhupada that the temperature in New York had dropped below zero, and that there had been a 2-day blizzard. Srila Prabhupada wrote, certainly this situation would have been a little troublesome for me because I'm an old man. I think Krishna wanted to protect me by shifting me here at San Francisco. Here the climate is certainly like India, and I'm feeling comfortable, but uncomfortable also because at New York, I felt at home on account of so many beloved students like you. As you're feeling my absence, so I'm feeling for you. But we are all happy on account of Krishna consciousness, either here or there. May Krishna join us always in his transcendental service. See, if somebody gets a letter like this from a spiritual master, how much encouragement it will give him. How much? And this is how Prabhupada motivated all of his disciples. The neophyte disciples in New York felt assurance from the spiritual master's words and by their own experience. Service and separation was a transcendental fact. They were improving in chanting of their beads. And the New York Center was going on. So long our kirtan is all right, Prabhupada wrote. There is no difficulty at all. But there was one difficulty. Attempts to purchase a new building, which had gone on smoothly while Prabhupada had been present, had become a great problem as soon as he had left. Shortly after Srila Prabhupada's departure for San Francisco, Brahmananda had given Mr. Price $1,000. And Mr. Price had promised to help the devotees get the building. When Prabhupada heard this, he became perturbed. In the opinion of the devotees and the trustees here, $1,000 has been risked without any understanding. I know that you're doing your best, but still there has been an error of judgment. I'm not at all displeased with you, but they say that Mr. Price will never be able to secure financial help from any other source. He's simply taking time under different pretext, changing constantly. Therefore, you should not pay even a farthing more than what you have paid. If he wants more money, you should flatly refuse. So cheaters are everywhere. What to do? Srila Prabhupada remembered Mr. Price in their first meeting, at which the blonde-haired, elegantly dressed businessman, his face tanned even in winter, had addressed him as Your Excellency. That address alone had made Prabhupada distrusting. There was a Bengali saying, too much devotion denotes a thief. In Bengali, it is said, what? Ati bhakti chorera lakshan. So somebody is, I mean, it's really for Prabhupada, he had experience, sounded like somebody is buttering him up. Means he's a thief. Something is wrong. Prabhupada knew that businessmen were prone to cheat and that an American businessman would be particularly difficult to deal with. Prabhupada's American disciples were innocent children in worldly affairs. He was ready to instruct them step by step, but now, without consulting him, they had become involved in an unbusinesslike transaction, risking $1,000 of the society's money without any written agreement. Srila Prabhupada had visited the building on Stuyvesant Street and he wanted it. It was a historical, well-kept, aristocratic building, suitable for his New York headquarters. It was worth the $100,000 price, if they could afford it. But it was difficult for Prabhupada to know from San Francisco what was going on between Brahmananda and the businessman. And the difficulty increased as letters and phone calls from Brahmananda introduced other persons in. Aside from Mr. Price, there was Mr. Tyler, the owner, and Mr. Tyler's lawyer, who seemed independent of Mr. Tyler. And finally, there was his ISKCON's lawyer, who also had a mind of his own. Although Srila Prabhupada's disciples usually surrendered to his direction, they seemed bent on listening to the businessman's promises, even though their spiritual master had cautioned them not to. Prabhupada became disturbed. His preaching in San Francisco was being threatened by fears that the businessman would cheat his society of what he had begun in New York. With no responsible advisors to turn to, Srila Prabhupada sometimes discussed the problem with Mukunda and other devotees in his room. They all agreed that the transaction seemed highly irregular. Brahmananda was probably being led on by false promises. Brahmananda, however, saw Mr. Price as a rare person, a successful man who wanted to help the devotees. Although no other respectable businessman had ever shown interest, Mr. Price listened and sympathized. And he would greet the devotees with Hare Krishna. Brahmananda was well aware of the humble economic and social position of the devotees. They were almost all ex-hippies and they were poor. But here was Mr. Price, a wealthy man with diamond cufflinks, who was always glad to see him, shake his hand, pat his back, and speak appreciatively of the religion of India and the moral behavior of the small band of devotees. Mr. Price had received a group of devotees as guests in his apartment and said nice things about each one of them. He had said that Hayagriva was an excellent writer and that Back to Godhead was the best magazine on the market, and that its mimeographed appearance made it look even better than the slicks. He said he would give the devotees a movie projector, and he came close to saying that if he could liquidate some of this money, he would give them the building. Brahmananda, who saw Mr. Price a few times a week, would come away intoxicated with high hopes. The Krishna consciousness movement could rise to success through this wealthy man's patronage. After leaving Mr. Price's office, Brahmananda would rejoin the devotees in the evening and tell them all that had happened. On nights when there were no public kirtans, the devotees would hold meetings. Swamiji had named them Ishtagoshti, to discuss the instructions of the spiritual master. And the Ishtagoshtis became dominated by talks of Mr. Price and the building. One night, Brahmananda explained why he had given Mr. Price $1,000. Mr. Price had asked for something to work with. It was like earnest money. And it was also for a trip Mr. Price had to take to Pittsburgh to see whether he could release some of his wealth to use in Krishna's service. One of the boys asked whether there would be any receipt or written agreement. Swamiji had taught them to use receipts, at least among themselves. Gargmuni and Satsvarupa, as treasury and secretary, signed each voucher, and Gargmuni kept the vouchers on file. These included requests for items like 50 cents for a hat and $3 for sneakers. Brahmananda said he had mentioned a written statement to Mr. Price, but hadn't pressed the matter. Anyway, it wasn't necessary or even desirable, since they were not simply conducting business with Mr. Price, but cultivating a relationship. Mr. Price was a well-wisher, a friend who was helping them as charity. He was going to do big things and use his influence to get the building. This $1,000 was just a gesture to show the interest and to show Mr. Price's friends and the devotees were joking. They had some money. In fact, the devotees had $10,000, $5,000 in small donations, and a $5,000 donation from a wealthy hippie. In addition to donations, the temple had a regular monthly income of $800. Brahmananda's $400 paycheck promised job as a substitute teacher for the New York City public school system, and the $400 paycheck Satsvarup earned as a case worker for the welfare department. But the devotees were in no position to buy any building, and they knew it. All the more reason, Brahmananda explained at Ishtagoshti why they had to depend on Mr. Price. After all, he reasoned Swamiji himself had inspired them to look for a $100,000 building. Swamiji knew they couldn't pay for such a building, except in some extraordinary way. And Mr. Price, Brahmananda figured, must be the way. Swamiji wanted the building. No sooner had he reached San Francisco that he had returned back. I am very anxious to hear about the final decision of the house. I wish to open the house by the 1st of March 1967, and arrangement may be done dexterously in this connection. The assembled devotees listened to Brahmananda's explanations, sympathized, and added their own understanding of how Krishna and Swamiji were working. There were a few contrary remarks and opinions, but basically everyone agreed. Brahmananda's dealings with Mr. Price were all right. When Kirtananda and Ram returned to New York from San Francisco, they consulted with Brahmananda. Then Brahmananda went to Mr. Price, who promised that if somehow they couldn't get the building, he would return at least $750. The balance of the money represented travel in devotees' interest, but they would get the building, Mr. Price assured them. Then Mr. Price told Brahmananda the latest. He had found a wealthy financier, Mr. Hall, who had almost agreed to pay the full $100,000 for the building. Mr. Price was working on Mr. Hall, who had happened to be his close friend. Prospects seemed good, but the devotees would also have to do their part, Mr. Price explained, by putting up $5,000. Mr. Price would then arrange everything else. Mr. Price set up a meeting with an architect on Park Avenue, and soon Brahmananda and Satsvarup were sitting with Mr. Price and his architect friend reviewing sketches. To give the building that authentic Indian temple look, the architect proposed a facade with arches and, if they liked, domes. It was wonderful, of course. They didn't dare ask him how much it would cost. But Mr. Price even hinted that the work might be done free. After Mr. Price served himself and his architect friend some liquor and offered some to the boys, although he knew they wouldn't accept it, the two men held up tinkling glasses, smiled, and politely toasted themselves and the boys, saying, Hare Krishna. This was their way of saying cheers. While going down on the elevator, Mr. Price spoke eloquently of the devotee's faith in God. He said that others might argue about the existence of God, but the most convincing thing was a devotee's personal experience. Your personal testimony, Mr. Price assured them, is the best argument. It's a very powerful thing. The boys nodded. Later, among themselves, they laughed about the liquor, but still they figured these men wanted to help. Okay, we can stop here and see what Prabhupada had to say about all this tomorrow. See anybody has any questions or comments? Okay, you all have a safe and wonderful day.